Carly. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown, a home of liberal religion. I'm the Reverend Kerry Mueller, minister here with the Reverend Dave Hunter. You are most welcome here, whether here means this room, masked and distanced, or geographically remote via Zoom, or temporarily remote via YouTube. But most important, you are welcome here, whoever you are, whatever your heritage, whomever you love, wherever you are on your spiritual journey. Are there announcements this morning?
Yes, I have an announcement.
Well, you may begin. Thank you very much. This is Patricia.
Yes, Patricia. I am, I'm sorry, I didn't prepare this. I just wanted to say that on Monday evening, there will be a discussion about the new House and state legislative maps in a town hall type setting, virtual, at 7 p.m., goes till 8:30. They will be talking about the maps that came down on Thursday. So if you haven't seen the maps, they are available. If you go to fairdistrictspa.com, I think you will see many links there. You just have to choose the ones that are the most recent for the State, House, and Senate maps. And if anybody has any questions, I can answer them for you, perhaps. So, that's it.
I'm moving it away because I want to take my mask off. Hi, I'm Linda. For those who don't know me, I'm president of the board of directors here at the fellowship, and I'm here with a public service announcement. So unless you've been sticking your head in the sand, everybody knows that we're at that time of the year where COVID is increasing. We've got a new variant that is far more contagious, and there's still a lot we just don't know and we can't predict in terms of what's going to happen with this disease. I just want to let everybody know that the board, and I'm really grateful for the members of the board who are willing to have these ad hoc meetings where we talk about what is it we need to do to keep the friends and members of this fellowship safe and healthy. And that is our primary goal. Our secondary, though, is we do know how important it is for many people to come in person to this fellowship. So we are trying to put things in place such that we can stay open and do it in a safe way. So there are some policies, procedures that we've put in place. The masking is really going to be enforced. We have the separation if you're coming here, that we are socially distanced. I know many people may have concerns or unhappy because we canceled coffee hour. What you need to understand, what we canceled is the eating part, right? I think most people, the primary goal of what we do after service is to gather together and talk. We can still socialize, but we need to keep our masks on. We need to keep a fair distance. The challenge is when we put food there, I don't know about you, but I can't eat through a mask, right? So the whole goal of canceling coffee hour was to basically make sure that we just don't have the food, create an environment where people are taking off masks. But please, hang out and socialize. We can still do that. That is what we're about. We can still have that community. We're going to be reviewing this on an ongoing basis. Like I said, our goal right now, we're going to be in person for Christmas Eve. And who knows what's going to happen as the weeks go on, so stay tuned. What I'm going to ask of everybody else is, again, if you can please adhere to the policies that we put in place. But also, if you're not feeling well, right, please stay home. And I'm thrilled to see, while I'd like to see the 6 or 7 people that I see are participating on Zoom in person, we've still got that option. So if you're not feeling well, you can stay in your jammies and dial us up via Zoom, right? The community is still here for you. So with that, again, it's just sort of a public service announcement. We are monitoring the situation very closely, and we do want to try to keep the doors open, but things may get out of control and we may have to make other decisions. But I just thank you for your assistance and support with this. All right? Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Miranda, and I just want to let people know that on Christmas Eve day at 4 o'clock, we're having a service, and excuse me, we're having what's called a mitten tree, and you are invited to bring mittens, hats, and that sort of thing, to put on the mitten tree so that we can give them to organizations who help people who need that sort of thing. So feel free to do that and decorate our mitten tree.
Thank you, Miranda. And also there will be a special offering that night, a cash offering to help an organization that helps our neighbors. Our opening words are from Annie Dillard. We are here to abet creation and to witness to it, to notice each other's beautiful face and complex nature, so that creation need not play to an empty house. Carly will play our opening hymn, which we were able to sing, would be On This Day Everywhere. It's number 249 if you want to look at it later. Thank you so much. Now, we actually have two things this morning for the children. So I postponed the chalice lighting. Would like to invite children and other people who are childlike to come forward. The story is especially for children, but you know it's always for all of us. Now, do you remember several weeks ago you had a hand in making a special chalice? Well, it's done. I didn't think it would be done yet because I had other people to help with it, but we're going to use it as the chalice lighting this morning. So, Linda, if you were to light the chalice, I will say the words. A waiting bowl, a spark, a flame. The winter solstice reminds us that darkness is not permanent, that the cycle of the year requires both light and dark. And our chalice light reminds us that we participate in that natural cycle, and that sometimes it is up to us to bring the light where it is needed. Thank you. Now, I'm sorry, I can't see any of you, but if Ruby would take the book and share it with the children. If you come over here, I can use the microphone and see you. So here, children, I have a question. This book that we're going to discuss this morning, or going to hear, it's not a science book. It's about creation, but it doesn't really talk about physics and the other important things in the world. It is more of a poem or a myth. Now, can any of the people, the young people here, tell me what a myth is? Sam, would you like to tell me?
Like a guess or a story?
It's a story, absolutely. Now, a lot of times you will see in the newspaper or elsewhere things that are myths that says, this is a myth, therefore it's not true. A myth is a story, and a story is something that may or may not have happened, but it still tells us something true. And this story does tell us something true. It's written and illustrated by Richard Techner and Jenny Smith, and it's called A Spark in the Dark. And there's about 3 pages in where we start to get to the text. Keep going. That's all the explanation. There you go. This is the story of a star in the sky, of where we all come from, the answer to why. It's about a blue ball, a mountain and tree, a light in our hearts, and our reason to be. A long time ago, when the sky was still dark, in a faraway corner there flashed a bright spark. It grew into a star, way up in the sky. Since no one was there, no one asked why. The star loved the darkness. It helped to shine, but was all by itself for a very long time. And the star grew lonely up there in the night with nothing to shine on or receive its starlight. So it made a blue ball and spun it around. It was pretty to look at, but way too far down. So the star made a mountain grow up from the sea, and it said to itself, now it's nearer to me. But the mountain just sat there, did nothing at all. So it put a green tree on the little blue ball. Now the star had the water, the mountain and tree, but still was not happy. How could that be? As the star looked around and pondered its plight, it spied down below its reflection of light. Down on the water they danced and they swam. The star had an idea. The star had a plan. It took a deep breath. It started to strain. Then starbeams fell down on the mountain like rain. They burst into beings of bright colored light. They could feel, they could hear, they could see every sight. They ran, they skipped, they tumbled and played on the mountain and tree that the star had just made. And the star was so happy with what it had done, it fell asleep in the sky, worn out from the fun. When the day turned to night, the star opened its eyes to twinkling lights that filled up the skies. What happened, you see, in each child's heart glows a piece of the star, of which we're all part. In the sky up above, as each child dreams, like the water, the darkness reflects their light beams. While children all sleep on the blue wall below, their lights twinkle above in a beautiful glow. The star was delighted. It sparkled with glee, surrounded by lights from you and from me. So remember tonight, as you sleep in your bed, a light from within shines over your head. And that is the story of a world that began with all little children as part of the plan. No matter the color, the shape, big or small, the star loved them all on a little blue ball. And that is the end of that story, or at least it's the part where you and I take over. So thank you very much for listening quietly. If you want to borrow that for the classroom, that would be fine. And eventually, we will send the new chalice to the classroom to be your chalice.
It's beautiful.
And thank you very much for helping to make it. Good day, little children. Are you going to stay here or go away today?
We're going.
Okay, have a good time. like to pass the basket around, we are reminded that this community requires all of us, our time, our talent, our treasure, and it helps us with all of those things. Here are some words from the Persian poet Hafez. Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. So, this morning we are lighting up the sky with our love, and the morning offering has been given and received. Carly, do you have some music for us? Every life is touched by joy. Every life has its share of sorrow. In this time together, we take a few minutes to share our joys and sorrows, our hopes and concerns. If you'd like to share, please come forward and use the microphone, or you can make a note in the chat, and I'll ask Rick to keep an eye on it. Are there sharings this morning? Well, we think this morning of so many people troubled so many ways in the world, from illness, the threat of illness, tornadoes, other effects of climate change, racism, injustice, and we think of all the quiet joys that people manage nevertheless. So let us remember that we are touched by the cares and the joys of every human being, those we hear about and those that are unknown to us. The meditation this morning comes from Victoria Safford, a UU colleague. She writes, "Now is the moment of magic, when the whole round earth turns again towards the sun. And here's a blessing. The days will be longer and brighter now, even before the winter settles in to chill us. Now is the moment of magic, when people beaten down and broken, with nothing left but misery and candles and their own clear voices, they kindle tiny lights and whisper secret music. And here's a blessing. The dark universe is suddenly illuminated by the lights of the menorah, suddenly ablaze with the lights of the kinara, and the whole world is glad and loud with winter singing. And now is the moment of magic, when an eastern star beckons the ignorant towards an unknown goal. And here's a blessing. They find nothing in the end but an ordinary baby, born at midnight, born in poverty, and the baby's cry, like bells ringing, makes people wonder as they wander through their lives what human love might really look like, sound like, feel like. Now is the moment of magic. And here's a blessing. We already possess all the gifts we need. We've already received our presents, ears to hear music, eyes to behold lights, hands to hold true peace on earth, and to hold each other tight in love. Amen. Number 123. morning is an old favorite by Robert Weston. It's number 530. It's called Out of the Stars. Out of the stars in their flight, out of the dust of eternity, here we have come. Starlight and stardust and sunlight mingling through time and through space. Out of the stars have we come, up from time. Out of the stars have we come. Time out of time, before time, in the vastness of space, Earth spun to orbit the sun. Earth with the thunder of mountains newborn, the boiling of seas. Earth born by sunlight, lived by sunlight, this is our home. Out of the stars have we come. Mystery, hidden in mystery, back through all time. Mystery rising from rocks in the storm in the sea, out of the stars, rising from rocks in the sea, kindled by sunlight on earth, arose life. Ponder this thing in your heart. Ponder with awe. Out of the sea to the land, out of the shallows came ferns. Out of the sea to the land, up from darkness to light, rising to walk and to fly, out of the sea trembled life. Ponder this thing in your heart. Life up from sea, rising to walk and to fly. Eyes to behold, throats to sing, mates to love. Life from the sea, warmed by sun, washed by rain, life from within, giving birth, rose to love. This is the wonder of time. This is the marvel of space. Out of the stars swung the earth. Life upon earth rose to love. This is the marvel of life. Rising to see and to know. Out of your heart cry wonder. Sing that we live. Our next hymn is number 283. It's Haydn's Creation, the spacious firmament on high. I'm so grateful to the hymn writer and to the arranger who brought that melody out. When I heard Haydn's Creation recently in the Wayne Presbyterian, that was there, but it wasn't quite as emphatic. Well, several weeks ago, Dave and I were seated with a newcomer at White Horse Village. He turned out to be a retired physics professor. I have to confess, I've never had the courage enough to take a physics course. Now, in an effort to get acquainted, I asked him a question from one of Dave's sermons that I've heard several times. I don't know, maybe he's preached it here. It's called, "Why is there something instead of nothing?" Now, the physics professor gave me an answer, a perfectly good answer, that did not satisfy me. He said that as the universe is infinite, it has no edge, and therefore there can be no nothing out there. But I was asking a more ultimate sort of question. Variations on that theme, that question, have been worming their way into my heart for many years now, and every time I hear it, I want to respond. Yes, Dave, and yes, physics professor, you have laid out our best understandings from science and philosophy and mythology. You pointed out that every answer so far begins not with nothing, but with something. Creation narratives begin with mud, or the void, or chaos, or at least God. The professor began with the universe as we know it. Science begins with space and time, or at least a set of laws and a fertile, fecund void with particles popping in and out of existence. Yes, you imagine that we might someday have a real answer, but not yet. And yes, you have challenged us to respond with the depth and breadth of our hearts and our values. I can't argue with any of that. And yet, I keep feeling that there is something more. Not anything that makes any more logical sense. Not a better argument or a more pointed lesson. Nothing really new within the systems of science and philosophy. My response comes from another place entirely. I can only say yes. Being simply demands embodiment. Fullness, richness, creativity, fecundity, overflowing love, joy, yes. Existence must be. There's no fun in a universe that isn't. Now, Marilyn Robinson, in her lovely novel, Gilead, addresses this issue. And that novel was by itself, and then it's part of a trilogy, and now there's a tetralogy. I haven't read the fourth book yet. The first book takes the form of a letter from John Ames, an elderly father, a devout Christian minister, to his very young son, a legacy to the boy that he expects he will not be able to share in person when the boy grows up. The father writes about being. We participate in being without remainder. No breath, no thought, no wart or whisker is not as sunk in being as it could be. And yet no one can say what being is. If you describe what a thought and a whisker have in common, and a typhoon and a rise in the stock market, excluding existence, which merely restates the fact that they have a place on our list of known and nameable things, and which would yield as an insight, being equals existence. If you could do that, you would have accomplished a wonderful thing, still too partial in an infinite degree to have any meaning, however. So he goes on to talk about God. You can assert the existence of something, being, having not the slightest notion of what it is. Then God is an even greater remove altogether. If God is the author of existence, what can it mean to say that God exists? Well, he goes on. Citing Coleridge, he advises the boy that Christianity is a life, not a doctrine. The writing is beautiful, the story entrancing, the advice a solid foundation for life. But Marilyn Robinson, in the character of John Ames, does not solve the question of existence either. Yes. So, neither blessed nor burdened by much understanding of physics, I plowed through an essay in Harper's Magazine by Alan Lightman, an MIT physicist and novelist, on the subject of what came before the Big Bang. He described two differing scenarios, and he seemed to agree with Dave that no, we don't know, but someday we might. Here is the second hypothesis, that the universe and time did not exist before the Big Bang. The universe materialized literally out of nothing at a tiny but finite size and expanded thereafter. There were no moments before the moment of the smallest size because there was no before. Likewise, there was no creation of the universe, since that concept implies action in time. Even to say that the universe materialized is somewhat misleading. As Stephen Hawking describes it, the universe would be neither created nor destroyed, it would just be. Such notions as existence and being in the absence of time are not fathomable within our limited human experience. We don't even have a language to describe them. So later on he interviews a brilliant young physicist from Ukraine named Alexander Valenkin. No cause is required to create a universe from quantum tunneling, but the laws of physics should be there. Briefly, we chat about what there means when time and space do not yet exist. Quantum tunneling, he explains, is that spooky phenomenon in which objects can perform such magic feats as instantly appearing on the far side of a mountain without traveling over the top. It has been verified in the lab, he says. And so, thus the entire universe could have suddenly appeared from wherever things originate in the impossible to fathom quantum haze of probabilities. I put suddenly in quotation marks because time didn't exist, but I've just now realized that this very sentence I used the verb did, which is the past tense of do. Got all that? Sounds like Lightman has in fact been reading Marilyn Robinson, or more likely she had been reading Lightman. At least he spared the reader the equations. The other hypothesis involves order and disorder, time, and a universe that goes back and forth between maximum and minimum order and size. It is proposed by Alan Guth and Sean Carroll. Skipping over the reasoning and the evidence, here's the description. If you think of time as a long road and the Big Bang as a pothole somewhere in that road, then a sign at the pothole telling you the direction to the future would have two arrows pointing in opposite directions, thus the name The Two-Headed Time. Well, I do like that image. It seems to support my own secret theology that God comes not at the beginning, but at the end of the universe. That all that creativity, all that splendid matter, all those spectacular Hubble photographs of the nursery of the cosmos, all of those hopes, all that fullness, all of the justice, equity, and compassion, it all reaches around like Ouroboros back to the beginning and becomes the great radiance. Now, I can't claim that this makes any reasonable sense either, but neither do entangled particles and quantum tunneling, and yet they seem to exist and to dance playfully where scientists can know them and be struck with awe. So I simply declare that being is inevitable, that the universe demands to be, and life will arise. I plowed through another article, A New Physics Theory of Life in Scientific American, about a brilliant young physicist at MIT who studies the mathematics and physics of a class of systems that include life. Jeremy England goes beyond Darwin to suggest that when a group of atoms is driven by an external source of energy, like the sun or chemical fuel, and surrounded by a heat bath, like the ocean or atmosphere, it will often gradually restructure itself in order to dissipate increasingly more energy. This could mean that under certain circumstances, matter inexorably acquires the key physical attribute associated with life. Now, all of this is very serious and deep, and right on the edge of my ability to understand it, but I am thrilled by the depth and the power of the questions these scientists are asking, and lost in awe at the outlines of the answers they are offering. Though I do wonder about that phrase you put in there, in order to. Where does that sense of purpose come from? For part of my World Religions Ministerial Fellowship Committee requirement, I took a course on Hinduism. Creation, we learned there, is not a solemn business, but a glorious act of lila, play. Hardly distinguishable from art, you might say. And I suspect that it is not a coincidence that the wife of the elderly minister in Gilead is named Lila. Here's what Google's Britannica tells me about lila. Sanskrit, play, sport, spontaneity, or drama. Ras lila matsukinen. A term that has several different meanings, most focusing in one way or another on the effortless or playful relationship between the absolute or Brahman and the contingent world. Yes, I know play. Play implies a player, and we're right back where we were at the beginning. My response fits nicely into Dave's scheme. It's a brute force solution to the question of existence, though I wouldn't want to use such a harsh term. But here we are. Yes is built into the universe. Even the word itself, the etymology of yes, seems to be a tangled mess that's under dispute, but one strong idea is that it is a subjunctive form of the verb to be, as in so be it. This seems to me as irresistible as being itself. And Anatoly Lieberman, the blogger who tells me all of this, also says we should not underrate the so-called ludic, that is playful, function of language. People like to play, and wordplay is among the greatest amusements there is. Well, I'll read to that. This is beginning to me to sound biblical. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh. Which brings us to Christmas. It's hard to believe how Unitarian Universalists will respond to Christmas. Theologically and emotionally, we are all over the map with respect to the story and the celebration. It's complicated. Some of our crustiest atheists reject everything about the theology, but they get all sentimental about Christmas itself. And please don't tamper with the words that I learned when I was a child. Sometimes our more traditionally spiritual people seem to channel our Puritan ancestors, refusing to take part in those customs and celebrations that come out of the pagan times, looking for a more pure theological message. And of course, pagans can have a field day reclaiming Christmas trees and Yule logs and feasting and lights. Many religions claim a virgin birth, or at least blame a deity for an awkward pregnancy. We can always find a reason for the season if we want to. But for people who grew up in dysfunctional families, Christmas can evoke memories of alcoholic rages, the whole celebration crashing down with a tree, or more subtle disappointments or sadness. Sometimes it's the sadness of this year, someone missing from the table, an anniversary of loss, or an illness, or the threat of loss, or Omicron. It can cast a pall over Christmas. Sometimes a ritual of remembrance or cleansing helps us to get through the time of relentless good cheer. Some folks just go along with the program or enjoy their favorite parts and avoid the others. Decorating can be fun, or a burden, or a horror if the neighbors have decided to drown out the moon and stars with their over-the-top lighting. I even hear that some people enjoy shopping. But the commercialism and the general too muchness gets to almost everyone. As I said, it's complicated. I remember being in some kind of a workshop discussion group when I was a layperson at the Arlington Church many years ago. The woman next to me was complaining about Christmas. I like some of the ideas of Christianity, she said, but I just can't see worshiping a human being. Now, I shouldn't have been startled, but I was. I just had never thought of it that way. In my own struggle to make sense of Christmas from a non-Christian viewpoint, but in a family with a Christmas tradition and a somewhat fraught celebration, there was the story, the image of a baby who was the hope of the world. I hadn't heard of Sophia Fah's words at that point, and I hadn't articulated it myself, but I liked the sense that the hope of the world lies in every baby, that every night a child is born is a holy night. Like being itself, something holy simply demands to be. It reflects the idea that the divine is all around us and within us, imbued in the fabric of the universe, becoming apparent to us when we pay attention. Long after that conversation, I found myself at Wesley Seminary, exposed to some different language for this idea. They spoke of God as breaking into the world, showing up in many forms, but uniquely in the person of Jesus, the baby born on Christmas night. As a person who sees metaphorical miracles in everything, but who rejects the idea of divine intervention or suspending the law of physics to work miracles, I couldn't quite swallow this language whole, but it seems to me that it has something to work with. Perhaps you have seen an old painting called Jesus at the Door, and I have a copy of it if you want to look at it later. A sentimental image of this idea as Jesus knocks patiently at the door of a modest but cozy English cottage. A blonde, blue-eyed, slightly effete Jesus of the European imagination, not the stocky, dark-skinned, unprepossessing Jesus, the anthropological reconstruction of what the real Jesus probably looked like. Or maybe you've seen the Halloween parody of that picture, where Jesus has a big plastic pumpkin in his hand, ready for receiving treats. The image seemed familiar the first time I saw it, and it's everywhere in the culture. You can even buy playing cards. Straight or parody, Jesus of the Force, a personal God or an abstract notion, embodied in nature. However, we long for the holy in our lives. So it is not surprising that the late David Bumbaugh, a humanist Unitarian Universalist minister, expresses something very similar to this idea in his book, The Education of God. Here, God has been locked in his study for eons, feeling depressed about the state of the earth. Things aren't going well. Wars, poverty, disease, famine, the usual. Finally, with the help of God's old ally, the Satan, God decides that the only way to really understand and empathize with creation is to enter the world directly, becoming fully human as a baby in a poor, oppressed country. His parents struggled even to find a place to birth him, in a stable among the animals. And it turns out the poor child even has to share his birthday with Christmas. So it's not about elevating a human to worship, but literally God with us, within us, among us, Emmanuel. Every night a child is born is a holy night. And once again, the divine breaks into the world to help us become what we most want to be. And the kingdom of God is at hand, or the realm of peace and compassion is within reach. It's up to us. God isn't there to do it for us, but something has burst into being, and we are blessed with the right and responsibility to make the most of that divine yes. So here's my Christmas gift to you. Not an answer, not a philosophy, not advice, just a meditation on being and how we experience the holy at this season and throughout our lives. May you find peace in embodying peace. May you appreciate and enhance the being in which we all live. Amen. Shalom. Salam. Blessed be. A joyous Yule, a happy solstice, and a Merry Christmas to you all. And now we have another hymn, number 245, Joy to the World. Now will you join with me in the words as Linda extinguishes the chalice for us. We extinguish our chalice flame, but not the light of wisdom, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and in our hands until we are together again. All blessings upon you in the weeks ahead. Amen. Harley, it's your turn.